allowing ourselves to meditate, awakening our understanding and our will help us to find that center, that kingdom of heaven that is within all of us, and then share it with the world who so desperately needs it. Thank you so much, Roderick and Courtney and Brian and Rob and Glenn and Matt. Thank you. Okay, please stand, and we're going to do something that most of you have not done in a long time. And I didn't want the words because I wanted to see how many of us could remember. You have your choice of flags, and Roderick. Let's say together the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Didn't that feel good? It does feel good. We've learned from our childhood every day in school, thank you, Tim, to make a promise to love our country, the place where we live, and to love one another. And that's kind of slid in there with indivisible. We are one under God. And so we celebrate today, this weekend, the independence of our country, becoming a new community, a new part of this world. We talk about freedom when we think of the 4th of July. And I chose For America the Beautiful to be our song because it reminds us of the beautiful landscape of our country and how much that means to us. Everybody is so proud of where they came from and where they live. One of the things that I love about Texas is the pride that people have in being here. I grew up in Illinois, and I couldn't tell you what the Illinois flag looks like, but I know what the Texas flag looks like, and I love to see it waving so proudly. So I chose that instead of singing the Star-Spangled Banner, and that's an incredible song. I love it. But it talks about how we gained our freedom, which is, it talks about the war. You know, the bombs bursting in air, and that in itself is a pride that we continue to carry through this day, that small group of pilgrims were so dedicated to creating a free place to live that was free from the royal rule. They had freedom to believe and to express their religious belief. They had freedom to own their own land and many others. But they fought with such conviction that small group defeated a great army. And that's noteworthy. So we talk about freedom. And I want to talk about the freedom within. Do we really feel free today? Do you feel free to express your beliefs, to express how you feel about something, to express your convictions? Or do you hold back? Do you feel free to Be all you can be, which is the Army slogan from a long time ago. Maybe it still is. But to be all you can be, or do you hold back? Maybe thinking, I'm not worthy enough to be who I envision myself to be, or I'm not good enough, or I just don't have the means. We're going to talk about letting go of the fight to be so that we can be free in mind, body, and spirit. There is a small story by Hafiz, which is one of my favorite poets from the 12th century, Persian poet and considered a very wise person. He says, once a young woman came to Hafiz and said, "What is the sign of someone knowing God?" And Hafiz became very quiet and stood in silence for nearly a minute, lovingly looking deep into the young woman's eyes, then softly spoke, "My dear, they have dropped the knife. The person who knows God has dropped the cruel knife most so often use upon their tender self and others. My dear, they have dropped the knife. The person who knows God has dropped the cruel knife most so often used upon their tender self and others." To me, that is freedom. That is freedom, because when we drop all of our resentments, our belief that we're not good enough, those words in our head that beat us up, when we drop the knife of judgment of others and of ourselves, we become free to receive our Christ consciousness as it is, divine. And this is what Jesus, our way shower, talks about when he talks about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is not a place, he says. It's not outside of ourselves. Stop looking out here. The kingdom of heaven is within. Charles Fillmore describes good and evil. And he says, this is from the book Christian Healing, if we think that evil exists as a power in the world that is working in our lives and in the lives of those about us, we make it an active force. And it appears to be all that we imagine it. And it gets bigger and bigger in our minds, doesn't it? When we let it go. Be wise, pronounce nothing evil, and only good will come. Pronounce nothing evil, and only good will come, because only good is here. That was my parenthesis. Evil is the subjective label we give to events we do not understand, and it is usually the result of humans misusing their God-given power. Evil does not endure. It is not a power that is God. God, where there is God, there is no evil. Where there is God, there is no bad. There is no darkness. We hear that in the Psalms. There is no dark to God. It's only light. There is no death. It is our humanness that creates the evil, that creates the darkness, that creates what holds us from being the divine creation that we are, that prevents us from knowing the kingdom of heaven that is within us. The Greek word for heaven is oranos, and it means expansion. Heaven is an expanding awareness of our divine potential, our Christ nature. We are in heaven whenever we are in the consciousness of God's presence and God's wisdom. Wherever we are, we have the ability, the God-given ability, to just center and know that we are the Christ consciousness. Many of you know, and I got so excited to begin that I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Emma Jane Conley, but I'm a hospital chaplain. I've been doing it for 15 years, and I knew when I heard my calling to be a priest, because I was in the Episcopal Church at the time, I knew that it was to hospital chaplaincy, that very specialized ministry. And I'll share with you, many people ask me in the hospital, well, what is your religion? And I'll say, I'm an Episcopal Baptist and I go to Unity. I was ordained with the Cooperative Baptist Church. And I came to Unity in 2010 and became a member. And I needed to come, well, I didn't know that I needed Unity, but I knew that I needed something. I was telling my friends at work, I need to be able to raise my hands and sing and clap my hands and dance. And you can't do that in the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church, which I love as well, is very contemplative. But I was at a place in my life and in my work, it expanded it, my belief that I had to express it more openly. And so good friends of mine brought me here, and I said, yes, this is my home, because it allows me to experience all that I possibly can, and it enriches my ministry to others who I meet where they are, wherever they are. So that's my introduction. But getting back to heaven and thinking about the badness or evil, heaven or hell. In my work, I have many experiences of being with people who are dying, either naturally or suddenly, and to be with families who are experiencing that and who are trying to process having to let go of their loved one. And people will say to me so often, I don't know how you can do this work. It's so hard. Well, yes, it can be hard. But my response to them is, there is no other place where I experience almost tangibly experience the presence of God. And that's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about the kingdom of heaven is very near you. The kingdom of heaven is within, and that is where our freedom is. So Jesus, as we know, explains things through parables. And, we'll read a parable even to this day and say, what in the world does that mean? And I think part of that issue is that we are not a storytelling society. We've kind of gotten away from expressing ourselves through story, and we need to bring that back a little bit more. But back many, years, it wasn't so much just 2,000 years ago, but up until the last couple of hundred years, people told their stories. And through the stories, they shared what they believed, they shared all about themselves. So they were used to hearing a story and probably picking up on the nuances that we don't. But in Matthew, at the beginning of Matthew, when Jesus receives his divine calling, he begins to heal. So there are just verses of him healing. And then he begins to teach. And at this point in the gospel, he sits on the bank and people are coming to hear him. And there are so many people that he has to get in a boat and go off into the sea because there's just too many. And so he kind of has a coliseum in the countryside of people there to hear him. So he tells 6 parables, explaining to them what the kingdom of heaven is. And I'll go over them just briefly, and then you can read through them on your own. The first parable is the sower. Most of these parables have seeds or treasures in them. So the sower goes out to sow his seed. And the first seeds, as he's going out, are just kind of fall off of his bundle. And the birds come quickly and snatch them up. And so those are the people who hear the word, I would imagine, hear the message for the day in church and love it, and then walk out and totally forget about it. And I've been there. It's like, I loved that sermon, but I can't remember what it was. And then the next one is the seeds that go out along the rocks. And those are the people that hear the word, they hear the message, and they love it, but it doesn't stay with them because there's no roots to help nurture it. Then there's the seeds that are thrown out among the thorns. The thorns come and cover up the seeds. Sunlight can't get to them and they die. And those are those of us who hear the message and want to continue with it and learn from it, but the cares of the world come crashing in. How many times are we meditating or we're in prayer and you forgot to silence your phone and bing, here's an alert. What's the alert? Well, it's, Yahoo News. And it takes you away from what you wanted to receive. And then there is the seed that goes to good soil, and it is watered and nurtured. And those are those of us who don't just hear the word, but we receive it. We receive it with our hearts, and our minds are open so nothing can come in and clutter our minds. Jesus talks so much about there are those of us who listen, who hear, but they do not listen. And they look, but they don't see it. And so we hear the word, but we don't know how, or we forget to take it in and allow it to work in us. Part of why I love to give a sermon, because that's my Episcopal roots, is that I'll choose a topic or a Bible verse about a month before I know I'm supposed to talk, and it just works on me every day. And I love it because I begin to see everything that's going on in my day through that eyes of that Bible verse or whatever scripture I'm planning to do. And then it starts to work on me, and I start hearing it while I'm sleeping. And it's so perfectly written out while I'm sleeping, and then I wake up and speakers know how that is. And that's what Jesus is talking about, allowing the word to affect us so that we really receive it and know that we are divine. The mustard seed and the leavened bread are two parables that you've probably heard most often. The mustard seed, which is the tiniest seed, when it's planted, a huge tree comes from this tiny seed, and it gives food and shelter to the birds and the animals. And that's the expansion of heaven that Jesus is talking about. The other one is the leavened bread. A woman mixes yeast with flour and bread that expands and becomes food. It becomes nurture for us. My mother, when I was growing up, baked bread from scratch about every other day. We were a family of 5. And she'd place the baking tins in our bedrooms on the south window, on the windowsills, so that it would rise. And we came home to that incredible smell of fresh baked bread. So that itself is heaven, yes. But that image of these flat materials that are put together and they rise, they expand. This is one of my favorite ones that Jesus talks about, and it's a hidden treasure. A man is walking through a field and he finds a hidden treasure, and he buries it, hides it away, and then runs off in joy, sells all that he owns, and then buys the field. And I love that. So joyous in the kingdom of heaven that you want all of it to be all around you and there for others. That's expansion too. The hidden treasure in the field, the next one that he talks about is a merchant is searching for that perfect pearl. And when he finds it, he goes and sells all that he owns to buy that pearl. Anyone been in a meditative practice and you find that you're in that place where your whole body feels like it's expanded, it's so much bigger than you are, and you feel light, and you're very present, but you're very, very relaxed and kind of almost floating. And if you do it in a group, and that person says, okay, now begin to come back, and you're like, no, I don't want to come back, I want to stay. That is truly a person who has found the kingdom of heaven. who has allowed our Christ consciousness to crack open our hearts and be in that place of divinity. The other one, the last one, is a fisherman's tale, which, they were by the sea, and many of them were fishermen. And he tells the story that the fishermen go out and they just catch an abundance of fish in their nets, and they haul it all in, and they go through and separate the good from the bad. As I went in the beginning, going back to that, the good and evil. If you put it into this mindset, the bad fish represent our bad ideas or thoughts, or those that take us away from our focused place. And so that idea of discernment, we need to discern what is good for us, and we need to discern what we no longer need, what we're carrying baggage, so that we can be light and be light to the world. So these themes are all about planting the newness of something, the expansion of that treasure that we find, which is the kingdom of heaven within us, and expanding it out to others. And what do we need to do to attain all of that? One thing: drop the knife. And what is this position? It's open. It's receiving. It's receiving love and light. So Jesus goes on to say, after he's with the disciples alone, he says, do you understand what I was saying? And usually when I was reading the gospel, usually they're clueless, like we are. But this time they say, yes, we got it. I think we got it. And so he says, all right, take this, you who have had the presence of God with you and are learning to take it in. You are like the teachers, the public teachers, who will sift out the good and the bad. And again, that's not people. It's what is good in our life and what is no longer useful, what it becomes detrimental to our lives. And you will share this with others. And you will share this with others so that they can know that the kingdom of heaven is within them. There is a wonderful book that I found in the bookstore. I'm a member of Booksaholics, I will have to say. Every time I come, I buy several books, and then I leave. And I found this little treasure. It's called 12 Power Meditation Exercise by Charles Roth, and it's a thin little book, and it takes each of the powers and talks about them and which disciple is attached with them, and then takes you through a meditation. And by the end of the book, it keeps adding the parts of the chakras, the energy. And by the end of the book, you're doing a whole body meditation. And I haven't gotten all the way through it, but I can't wait. And so brings up understanding and will. And what I'm talking about with discernment and listening and really opening ourselves to hear and to understand, that's our understanding and our will. So understanding goes with Thomas, which makes sense. The one who's questioning, the one who's discerning. He wants to understand. He really wants to get it. And then the will is attached to Matthew, who is a symbol of action. So we receive the understanding, and then we act, and then we release what we have. And what's neat, and it makes perfect sense to me, is both of these energies are right here in the forehead. Understanding is right between the eyes, and will is right here. And what's up here? The crown, the divinity. So, and kind of over here is faith. So it's all wrapped around beautifully. Allowing ourselves to meditate, awakening our understanding and our will help us to find that center, that kingdom of heaven that is within all of us, and then share it with the world who so desperately needs it. To finish up, I wanted to, this all made such a preamble to what we're going to begin to do with Reverend Cynthia next week, which is begin to read together the Trusting Change book, and to go through exercises within that book, both individually and as a group. And that's to help us do what? Drop the knife first to ourselves and to one another, so we can then begin to hear and to see all of what we can bring to this beautiful church in a newness, a new kingdom of heaven that God will lead us through. So I have some questions for you to leave you with. Are you willing to drop the knife that harms your precious selves and keeps you from freedom? Are you willing to connect your divine understanding to discern God's will and clear out what no longer feeds you, what is no longer good for you in your life? Are you willing to drop the knife that harms your brothers and sisters? Let go of those resentments. Let go of those ouchy conversations. Let them go. Drop it and release. And are you willing to act out of your Christ consciousness and become expansive beyond what you thought you could imagine to be, and beyond what you thought Unity Church of the Hills could be? That's your homework to prepare you for next Sunday. May God continue to bless you with courage. May God continue to bless this congregation with abundance. May God continue to bless you with discernment and direction. May God continue to love you and set you free. And so it is. Amen.
Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.